questions that have been asked may be addressed in this next and final section about additional details from that PEPCO pilot, courtesy of Steve Sunderhoff, who's part of the regulatory group at PEPCO Holdings, which oversees several different utilities. He heads up their program evaluation department. He's got a BA in economics, an MS in management, and a JD from the George Washington University Law School. So this is an educated man. He's a member of the Maryland Bar and of the Association of Energy Professionals. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Yes. I wanted to basically quickly address where PHI is on the utility smart grid AMI business case issue. Just a quick sense of who we are. Basically, PHI owns largely a transmission and distribution business, owning Atlantic City Electric, Delmarva Power and Light, and PEPCO, and serving kind of the mid-Atlantic region, basically from Washington, D.C., parts of Maryland and Delaware, and also in southern New Jersey. Basically, just to give you a sense of where we've been on this whole smart grid rollout, it's kind of like a pipeline that gives you a sense of where we are at as a utility, with work, kind of preliminary work beginning in terms of thinking about what the future might be for smart grid back in 2005, with filings to our commissions in 2007. Those filings later in time were joined also with AMI-specific business cases and a couple other studies to support those business cases. And then also various filings related to other smart grid components related to direct load control. And if you go out in time, you can see some of the approvals and some of the key items. In 2008, late 2008, we received Maryland PSC approval of direct load control equipment, and in 2008, we also received a Delaware approval to deploy AMI. And if you look out a little bit in the future, beyond that, in 2009, we received approval from the New Jersey BPU to deploy direct load control for residential customers. Work began on field testing in our Delaware market, so a number of things are going on simultaneously. Then in the middle of all of this process, there was the effort from the ARRA stimulus funds. So we sought whatever available stimulus funds would be available to our various jurisdictions, and were awarded funds to support our rollouts in our PEPCO service area. We received District of Columbia PSC approval, as Commissioner Morgan mentioned, in December of 2009. Pretty concurrent in time, we began the deployment of AMI meters in Delaware market in late 2009. More recently, in August-September period, the Maryland PSC provided approval of AMI deployment in our Maryland PEPCO market with certain conditions. And our Delmarva, Maryland market, we're working through the regulatory process on that to seek final approval on that AMI deployment. I should also note that we have begun deploying meters in the District of Columbia actually earlier this month in October, and so that deployment process has begun. We've completed approximately 180,000 AMI meter deployments in our Delaware market. Turning to the next slide, when we thought about constructing the business case, we looked at a number of issues, what the regulatory approval process is in each of our jurisdictions, and kind of tailoring our approach to be specific to what the requirements are in each of those commission processes. Basically, looking at the legislative environment in our mid-Atlantic area, there are a number of legislative initiatives driving energy efficiency and peak demand reduction goals in the market. Things like, for example, in Maryland, we have a 15% energy and peak demand reduction goal in place by 2015, and in our other markets, we have some similar goals in place. Looking at the regional market drivers, we're operating entirely within the PJM marketplace, and that's a restricted market. In our case, we sold our generation assets, and so we're really a pure transmission and distribution company, and thinking about how that factors in to some of the savings that can flow through on the AMI side as part of the benefit stream. And we also look at the energy supply conditions. In our markets, basically there's a lot of transmission constraints and supply constraints in the summer months, which have caused basically prices to be fairly high, particularly on the capacity market side, and have put strong pressure to basically build additional transmission into the region. AMI, we think, offers a useful tool to basically pass more information to consumers and to get them to respond to kind of demand response initiatives. One of the other things that we look at is customer receptivity. Are customers going to be willing to embrace some of these new ideas, and working on education and communication efforts that help shape those ideas. AMI overall costs are obviously a big issue. One of the ways that we went at getting a real handle on those costs is we began to do fairly extensive RFPs, select vendors very carefully, and to just negotiate agreements with those vendors for what those costs would be. So we had some firm handle on costs. Of course, the whole benefit issue that Chris King touched on, the quantifiable versus the difficult to quantify. And one of the things that we found in the process is that, depending on the commission and the mix of interveners, benefits, basically some people will challenge one set of benefits and others will challenge another set of benefits. And in one case, in one of our markets, we had the commission staff basically complain that we hadn't included energy efficiency savings benefits, and in another one of our commission processes, basically the commission had complained that we had included them. So sort of like if you change and deal with things as you move through, you'll find that damned if you do, damned if you don't. But we really want to try to get a good handle on what the benefit stream looks like. The time period for the equipment, our thinking had been basically that the equipment time period to look at really is 15 years, or contracts go to that effect in terms of the AMI length of life, at least 15 years and beyond. But we've also had some serious discussions about that with various interveners. And the different customer bill impacts, and a lot of the commissions are very focused on that issue. And a lot of media basically asked that question out of the gate. Quickly turning to the next slide, basically the AMI business case, and this is an illustrative example of the case that we ran in our market in DPL in Delaware, and I'm trying to steer away from active case proceedings that we're in, but just to give you a sense for how we looked at that, we looked at the costs and the operational benefits, and then we looked at the benefits that related to basically reducing demand and reducing energy use, really focused on peak demand reduction, and we did some different modeling to kind of get a sense for what that range might look like, and to demonstrate that to commissions and to obviously other interveners as to the value of the AMI proposition. One of the questions that we had to basically deal with is you have this series of benefits out there, and you have to basically go through that and determine which ones are reasonably quantifiable in some certainty and can kind of withstand the regulatory scrutiny process without having a lot of caveats to them. And so we tried to select those benefits that we thought were most definable and most appropriate for calculating. And we know that there are a number of things that are difficult to quantify, such as the value of integrating renewable disparate resources. We're getting a lot of PV arrays in our southern New Jersey market and areas of our PEPCO service territory as well. And thinking long term about things like integrating PVs, plug-in vehicles. And we didn't quantify that benefit just because it was difficult to get a quick handle on what that was. The energy delivery benefits, basically, these are the ones that we qualified in our Delmarva market. And you look at kind of the list, and I'm sure that a lot of these basically tie well to what Chris laid out, but we looked at both our electric AMI deployment and our gas AMI deployment and try to get a pretty good handle on what we thought the cost impact was from a distribution utility standpoint. One other item of note there is one of the things that we did kind of think a lot about is the service quality improvement for consumers, and it's really difficult to quantify that because we don't have a good handle on how much value customers have for getting some type of distribution service quality improvement through AMI by basically not having estimated bills and that type of thing. It's a tough one to really get a handle on quantifying, but we do think that that's going to be a big benefit to our consumers. One of the things that Commissioner Morgan talked a lot about was this idea of how basically dynamic pricing pilots can help inform the process in terms of what dynamic pricing might bring to the equation and what consumers might be willing to do in response to dynamic pricing. The other thing that I would note is that one of the benefits in the District of Columbia of the pilot and the way the pilot was constructed as kind of a joint stakeholder process was this idea that we kind of simultaneously educated all of the key stakeholders in the District of Columbia, the Office of People's Counsel, the Commission itself, and the IBEW was a participant, Consumer Utility Board, and even members of our own utility staff. Basically, were dealing with these issues in terms of how you could structure this and put this in place and see what all the detailed requirements would be. So we kind of all could jointly see, what was going on and how valid that process was. And I think even though that kind of joint effort can take longer to put in place, it does really lessen some of the intervener issues that might be ongoing when you subsequently propose dynamic pricing that's enabled by AMI. So we did think that was a beneficial process, and we do look towards dynamic pricing pilots in other jurisdictions also as evidence for what the savings might look like.